And welcome back to American Agenda. I'm Tom Basile in for Bob Sellers, along with Heather Childers. The Biden administration is reportedly working to develop a COVID-19 vaccine passport. This comes after a growing list of companies are saying that they will require people to show proof of vaccination before opening up again or providing them access. People will also need to show vaccination status before traveling, going to sporting events, and taking cruises. Joining us to discuss is the chairman of the Committee to Defeat the President and former Republican Colorado State Senator Ted Harvey and Democrat strategist Sarah Norman. Ted, let me start off with you. Doesn't this raise privacy and freedom of movement issues for a lot of folks that people should be really concerned about?
Yes, it definitely does. I think it should scare every single American that the administration wants to violate our constitutional right of freedom of travel from going from one state to another state, but also violating our medical freedoms and privacy and saying that we have to tell everybody in the world what our medical history is. And that should scare anybody, because if we allow them to do it on this issue, what else are they going to ask us to do it on? And we should be fighting back. And the best way to fight back is to say we're not going to do it. And to those businesses who are going to try to comply with this, tell them we're not going to use your businesses anymore. And the more of us that do that, the more pressure it's going to put on these corporations to put pressure on government, because that's really who the government's going to be listening to in the end.
Yeah, Sarah, it sounds very similar to something that China has already implemented across its country, and that is using an app to track this type of information amongst all of the people there. And I'm not so sure that we want to be following in the footsteps of China.
I see it differently. For example, I'm a New Yorker, and New York launched their own vaccine passport app this morning that basically gives you your own private, safe QR code that says that either you've been vaccinated or have had a recent negative COVID test that you can show to a business or venue. And I want to be clear, the business and venues are not required to ask for this, but if they do, they'll be able to have more people inside their venues faster, which will help boost our economy more quickly. And also, it was free. It was super easy. It took about a minute to sign up. But I love having it on my phone because, one, I don't want to forget the vaccination record card that they give you when you are vaccinated. And also, that card does have my personal information. This QR code doesn't. So it's a lot safer to have. And also, it will prevent forgeries. I mean, we've seen forgeries go for $200 in this country already. So overall, this will reinvigorate the economy and protect the public and your records at the same time.
Sarah, though, aren't you concerned, though, that you just gave a whole bunch of your personal information and you are opening up healthcare information being given to the state of New York? State of New York doesn't have the best track record on COVID-19. Aren't you concerned about providing the state with a way to also track you, where you are going, your movements, and how you're operating?
So I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding there. The state isn't going to track you. This is something that you could present to a venue. And by the way, the venue won't have any access to your records. This is all done through blockchain. So it's incredibly hard to hack, which is why it will prevent forgery. And if I could just nerd out for a second, you can tell me if this is too much. But the reason that that's so important is because basically with blockchain, it's a database where it's a chain of blocks. And when each block gets added, it has a timestamp and a unique code. And so let's say that a hacker was trying to come in and take your vaccination records and change it to their name. It would be incredibly hard to do that because it wouldn't match every other kind of record. That's the beauty of doing this on blockchain. And so this checks us all, but they're not tracking us. The venue doesn't know who you are.
I don't know. I was definitely tracked by New York City when I flew in on at least 3 different occasions. I would leave my home and then go to a walk in Central Park, and then all of a sudden I would get a text or a notice from them. So somebody knew that I was leaving my house to go for a walk. Ted, I do want to ask.
This can't be that. I mean, if you think about it, the venue doesn't even know who you are, and the venue would have to then ping it back to New York State. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Unless the state ultimately requires them to do that.
And that's the other thing, Ted, that many people have said this would open the door for a lot of other personal information to become eventually required by the government.
Well, Heather, you're exactly right. For Sarah to say that this isn't the government doing it, I fly every weekend. I fly into New York almost every other weekend. And when I go in there, there are 5 or 6 military people standing there in their uniforms telling me I have to fill out this form so that they can track me. That is the National Guard of the state of New York telling me that I have to fill out that paperwork before I can get by these soldiers and go through the airport. If Governor Cuomo is that maniacal that he would put the National Guard at every airport and people coming off the planes, what else is government going to do when they have the power to do it? And that should scare every American. All you have to look back is the history of the world. It sounds like, where are your papers, sir? Which is what the Nazi military was doing when they were stopping people every airport and every exit off every Autobahn across the country. That should scare everybody.
And of course, there was $50 billion for domestic health care surveillance that was in the recent spending bill that President Biden signed. And we don't know what that money really is going to be used for, but it's domestic surveillance of American citizens. Ted Harvey and Sarah Norman, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, Iran and China's latest move, putting the world on edge as China's push for influence in the Middle East is not only dangerous, but scary. And that's not the only